This video is to be a quick checkup of what you guys went over yesterday. I had a couple people say they didn't quite get the lesson, so I figured that I would go through some things since you guys are used to the way I explain things, and hopefully this will help, along with Mrs. Corbley's videos, to understand the lesson. So what we're doing is we're starting back with polynomials that are in factored form, such as the ones right here in the monitoring progress 4 through 6. And the idea is, in order to find what your variable is you have to set things equal to 0, because the zero product property tells us if you have any two numbers, let's say 6 times 0, what's going to happen when you multiply them because of 0 is it is going to equal 0. So what if all you know is you took some number 6 and you multiplied it times some other number, and we don't know what it is, but you do know that the product is 0. So that tells you, because of the way 0 is, that this number x has to be 0. So now, what if you have two variables, x and y, and they're equal to 0? Now, you're not sure what either of them is, but here's what you do know. One of them must be 0 because of what happened, what we did before. So that means either x is 0 or y is 0, or they both could be 0. So that's the zero product property, is the idea that when you have things multiplied together and you don't know what they are, one of them has to be 0 if you know their product 0. So for instance, like number 4, you have two things multiplied together. You have 3s plus 5 and and 5x plus 8. So your choices are that 3x, that's an s, plus 5 equals 0, or 5x plus 8 equals 0. Now you just have two nice little linear equations to solve. And I know that Mrs. Corbley said sometimes you're going to get fractions, and that's fine. So there's one answer. So one thing we know is s could be -5/3, and solving the other one, and of course this is an s. Dividing by 5, my other s could be -8/5. So you're going to do that for each of these. Now in number 5, the nice thing is because that's squared, there are two of them, but they're exactly the same. So you don't have to solve it twice. Number 6, on the other hand, there's three choices for D. Okay, now factoring. That's the other thing. I had someone say that they really didn't get it at all. So here's the way factoring works. What you do when you factor is you're unmultiplying. So what is the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So the way you want to look at this is you want to take something like 4x to the 4th plus 24x to the 3rd and start with the numbers. So look at the numbers. Think of a number that you can divide out of both 4 and 24. Now if you said 2, that's fine. If you say 4, that's fantastic. But you'll get to the 4 no matter what. So I'm going to do this twice, once with a 4. Actually, I'll do number 7 and do it with a 4, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so what I do is I like to put an upside down division sign, because division sign looks like this. If I had like 28 divided by 4, it would look like this, and I would put the 7 up here, and then I would check, multiply, and then subtract, and I get 0. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it upside down. So we're going to be working down our paper. So I'm going to divide 4 out. So I do 4 divided into 4x to the 4th. I get x to the 4th left, and then I do 4 divided into 24, and I get plus 6x to the 3rd. And then I look at what I have left. I have no numbers. See, I have a 1 here and a 6 here, and the only thing I can divide out as a 1, but that doesn't change anything. Remember, I want to change what I have. So I look at the x, and what you do is you find the smallest power, and they all have to have it. So x, x. If I had another term here, like a plus 4, well, let's put a different number because we divided 4 out. Let's say plus 2. I couldn't factor out an x because the 2 doesn't have any x's. So what I want to do is look at the terms that I have, and I want to factor out the lowest power that I see. And the lowest power I see is a 3. So I'm going to write down below here, I'm going to make another division symbol, and I'm going to write x to the third. And now underneath, I'm going to divide that out. So remember, when you divide x's, you subtract their exponents. So x to the fourth divided by x to the third is just an x. And then I'm going to keep the 6, and then x to the third divided by x to the third is x to the 0, which is 1. Or you can think of the idea as I took all of them and I put them out in front here. So that's all that's left. So now I look at what I have and I see if there's any common factors, and there's not. So how I get my answer is I multiply everything that I wrote along here, and in parentheses I put left what's at the bottom of my division. So that's how you want to think of factoring, as undividing. So let me do example number 7 here real quick so you guys can see how this can work. So I have 8y squared minus 24y. Now, as I said, let's say you didn't see the greatest common factor. So let me put my division thing, and let's say I saw the 24. I'm like, oh, I know 4 works, so I do the 4. So I'm going to divide the 4 into 8, and I get 2y squared. And I divide the 4 into the 24, and I get the minus 6y. Now I look at the two numbers again, and I notice, oh, they still have a factor of 2. Don't erase what you did, just go ahead and divide it out again. So I put a 2 here. And now I'm going to divide the 2 into the 2 and get 1y squared. 2 into the minus 6y, I get minus 3y. Now I see there's no more numbers in common, so I am going to do the variables. And I notice they both have a variable, so that's good. So, but the lowest power is here. I should put a 0 there. It looks like a 0. The lowest power is here. It's a 1. So I'm going to factor out just a y. I'm going to divide that out. So y squared divided by y, subtract the exponents, is y, minus 3. Y divided by y is 1, or y to the 0, which is 1. So now I'm going to multiply these 3 together, and I get 8y times y minus 3. And that would be the answer. Now just to start this over again real quick, if you would have seen that the greatest common factor was 8, you could divide that out first, and then divide out the y, and you would get the same answer. Here's your 8y, and then there's your y minus 3. So that's another way to look at factoring if you're having some trouble yesterday. And then finally, I had several people tell me that the last problem, they didn't get it. It wasn't in the video or something. It was cut off. So here's the idea of this. We have this archway over a fireplace, and they put a grid behind it so it's on the next Y grid. And we're given the equation that models the arch. And we know x and y are in inches. So this is the floor here. And we are to figure out how wide the entrance at the ground level is. So we want the distance from here to here. So if you notice from what you were doing in the lesson, these are the x-intercepts. And the x-intercepts mean that y equals 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this equation and set it equal to 0, because y is how high off the ground you are, and if we're on the ground, it's 0. So now what you are to notice is this is a factored polynomial. There's one factor, there's one factor. Now the nice thing is -1/9 you can just ignore because numbers are never zero. So you're going to set your other factors equal to 0 and solve for x. I like factors like this when there's no number in front of the x because it's really just the opposite sign of what you're adding or subtracting. So I know that the second one, when I add 18, that's already the answer. So if you can skip right to that step, go right ahead. All right, so now we know our two x-intercepts. So what we have here now is that this point is at 18 inches and the other point is at -18 inches. So how far apart is -18 and 18? Well, that just tells me that this distance is 18 from the y-axis and this side is 18 inches from the y-axis. So I can just add those together and I get 36 inches is the width of the entrance. All right, gang, I hope that helps. If it doesn't, please ask questions. Your assignment today will be practice finding zeros and also practicing factoring.